Chapter 12 The Ultimate Shortcut 1. If we were to summarize the previous chapter in a single sentence, it might read something like this. A shortcut is essentially an overemphasis on physical, visible things, leaves and fruit, and a de-emphasis of the trunk and branches, the invisible truths hidden behind things. What I wish to discuss now is what we might call the ultimate shortcut, the shortcut ideology in its most pervasive, extreme form. This ultimate shortcut amounts to a blindness to eternal, independent, universal truths. It denies that the trunk and branches of the tree of truth even exist, believing instead in a floating mass of unconnected, unsupported leaves and fruit. I hesitate to give this ultimate shortcut a name because every term that comes to mind carries with it certain semantic baggage that could lead to misunderstanding or oversimplification. Nevertheless, I will give it a name, but first allow me to describe it in greater detail. To begin, I invite you to study this simple chart, which divides many of the concepts we've discussed in this book into the two categories visible and invisible. This chart features a list of visible items on the left side, together with a list of each item's invisible counterpart on the right. So first, on the visible side, we have leaves and fruit, and on the invisible side, we have trunk and branches. Physical things and eternal truths. The senses and reason. Flesh or body and spirit or soul. Animal and divine. Earth and heaven. Natural man and God. As mentioned, the ultimate shortcut is an inflated emphasis on the items in the left column, while dismissing the things in the right column as insignificant or non-existent. Both Paul in the New Testament and Jacob in the Book of Mormon described this as being carnally minded as opposed to spiritually minded. Socrates framed it as caring more about our bodies than about our souls. Oscar Wilde called it the worship of the senses. It is so easy to be drawn into this mindset. After all, we constantly interact with the physical, visible world through our bodies. Our senses are strong, powerful, constant, inescapable. Consider the pungent, spicy taste of a jalapeno pepper, the crisp, salty smell of an ocean breeze, the breathtaking sight of a beautiful landscape, the deafening blare of a train horn. How could we possibly resist their demands for our attention? And of course, the visible sensory world is important, but as I've tried to demonstrate, it is incomplete. Only one component of the grand tree that makes up all of reality. To focus on it at the cost of neglecting those invisible, eternal things, which in truth aren't things at all, can lead to some very real evils. It can lead to self-centeredness, since such selfless virtues as love, patience, service, and sacrifice are invisible. A person's sense of good and evil, right and wrong, may begin to crumble, embracing instead the philosophy Korihor taught that every man fared in this life according to the management of the creature, a mindset Joshua Fields Millburn might describe as loving things and using people. It can lead to hedonism, the pursuit of pleasure and the gratification of the senses at the expense of all other virtues. Pity the person, said Jim Rohn, who has a favorite restaurant but not a favorite thinker. That person has taken care to feed his body, but not his mind or soul. Addiction is the inevitable offspring of such pleasure-seeking, whether it be to alcohol, pornography, or of a more seemingly innocent nature, like to chocolate or social media. It can lead to an undue emphasis on public recognition, physical appearance, and social status, measuring one's own worth and the worth of others by superficial metrics alone, without considering the deeper development of character traits such as integrity, humility, kindness, and service. This is the state Shakespeare described, in which one's poor soul pines within and suffers dearth, while painting thy outward walls so costly gay. It can lead to a condition repeatedly warned about in Holy Writ, in which people set their hearts upon the vain things of this world, turn aside the just for a thing of naught, and revile against the good, deeming it to be of no worth. It is to lay up for oneself treasures upon earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal, to be careful and troubled about many things, while neglecting that one needful thing, that good part which shall not be taken away. And, since you can buy virtually anything in the physical world with money, it all too often leads to the love of riches, which Paul warned is the root of all evil. A sobering list of unworthy destinations indeed, and all arrived at by means of the same path, this great and ultimate shortcut. What then shall we call it? Alan Bloom offers a handsome list of possible names: relativism, determinism, reductionism, homogenization, even, curiously, modern natural science. Each term is insightful and thought-provoking, but Bloom suggests one other name, the one I propose we adopt: materialism. Materialism. When most people hear the word materialist, they tend to think of someone fixated on the acquisition of money and material possessions. While this definition isn't exactly wrong, I hope you can now see that the true meaning of materialism runs much deeper. The outward behaviors of loving riches and laying up treasures upon earth are merely the leaves and fruit of a deeper-rooted ideological tree, a way of seeing the world that disregards the eternal, invisible foundation stones of reality. Ironically, this shallow perception reflects a widespread materialistic view of materialism, one that ignores its more hidden, profound dimensions. Even with its risks of oversimplification, I prefer this name to all others because it so directly references the core essence of this ultimate shortcut: an affinity for, reliance upon, and exclusive belief in material things and the material world. What better name than materialism? I reiterate, now that we've named it, it's vital to remember that materialism runs deep, beyond its symptoms and outward manifestations, beyond the leaves and fruit, all the way to the trunk of our personal trees. It offers a simple yet inadequate answer to the ultimate question: what or whom do we place at the center of our lives? In what or in whom do we trust to provide us with life? The trunk. Something must occupy the position of central trunk in each of our personal trees. Some entity must serve as the axis around which our faith cycle revolves. That pedestal cannot remain empty. If we attempt to leave it vacant by pushing out its current occupant, something else will take its place. If we neglect that innermost space, choosing instead to focus only on the outer layers of our lives, we present the opportunity for anything to creep inside and quietly dethrone the current trunk and begin its own reign undetected. Then, subtly, slowly, this sneaky usurper may begin to manipulate the branches of our trees, revising our beliefs and values. Granted, our leaves and fruit will naturally begin to change as well, but if done gradually and as long as our attention remains fixed on the outward surface, the deeper transformation often goes unnoticed. And when we do detect some changes, we can often be easily convinced that these adjustments are, in fact, desirable. Meanwhile, our cunning supplanter can work to camouflage himself, smothering out or tangling up any branches of truth, branches which, had they ever caught his victim's eye, might have been easily traced back to him, a scrawny, twisting, sickly figure standing where a firm, thriving trunk ought to be. Such may be the condition of the materialist who, whether convinced and flattered by clever argument, or pacified and lulled into carnal security, chooses this ultimate shortcut and trusts not in him who is come that they might have life, and that they might have it more abundantly, but in the belief that a man's life consists in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. One who turns not to the God who giveth to all life and breath and all things, and in whom we live and move and have our being, but instead to a God like unto gold or silver or stone, graven by art and man's device, placing their trust in the arm of flesh rather than in the holy arm of Jesus Christ. Materialism promises life and abundance. It promises security, safety, peace, and comfort to those who trust in it and fear and tremble before it. But that promise is a lie. For what profit can these comforts of the body, powers which at best merely postpone the inevitable fading of the flesh while leaving the immortal soul untouched, what profit can they be to a man or woman whose soul is not filled with good, but has instead walked after vanity and become vain? Is not the life more than meat, and the body than raiment? This kind of security is mortal's chiefest enemy, Shakespeare warned, foreshadowing the ruinous end met by Macbeth, who ultimately chose to savor not the things that be of God, but the things that be of men. His story remains a stark reminder of the folly and fruitlessness of placing one's trust in the vain things of this world. The tragedy of Macbeth. At the beginning of this play, Macbeth is a general in the Scottish army. As he returns from a battle in which he has shown great heroism, he encounters 3 witches who pronounce a startling prophecy: that he will become Thane of Cawdor, a high-ranking position in the kingdom, and then he shall be king hereafter. Scarcely have the witches vanished when Macbeth receives the message that King Duncan, as a reward for his bravery, has declared him Thane of Cawdor. This prompt fulfillment of the first half of the witches' prophecy shocks and astounds him, and he takes it as an earnest of success, a sign that perhaps the second half will be fulfilled as well. Macbeth reports this event to his wife, and when the king announces his intention to visit them in their home, the two begin to scheme about how they might take advantage of this surprise visit to make the witch's prediction a reality. When King Duncan comes, they hold a banquet for him, drug him and his servants, and then, while he is sleeping, murder him, making it appear as if his servants committed the crime. At the news of his assassination, the king's sons flee the country, fearing that some plot to seize the throne is underway, and that their lives may be in danger. Therefore, Macbeth is crowned King of Scotland, fulfilling the witch's words and bringing to reality both his and his wife's ambitions. Yet, rather than settling into comfort and security at his sudden rise to abundant power and material wealth, Macbeth is riddled with guilt, paranoia, and fear that his newly acquired throne will be torn from underneath him, perhaps by stratagems similar to the ones he himself employed. To be thus is nothing, he laments, but to be safely thus. In an attempt to more firmly secure his position, he hires some men to quietly murder both his friend Banquo and Banquo's son, whom Macbeth perceives to be his greatest threat. But this act, unsurprisingly, does not bring him peace and security, but instead only increases his guilt and fear to an almost unbearable intensity. Desperate for peace and safety, Macbeth returns to the witches, appealing to them for further affirming prophecies. They oblige and pronounce these 3. Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife. Be bloody, bold, and resolute. Laugh to scorn the power of man, for none of woman born shall harm Macbeth. Macbeth shall never vanquished be until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Despite the warning about Macduff, Macbeth is emboldened by these prophecies, for who is there that is not born of woman? And who can impress the forest bid the tree unfix his earthbound root? But, to be safe, he orders Macduff and his family to be killed. Thus Macbeth stands, sure of his safety and protection. But in the end, the witch's words prove to be only the foretelling of his doom, cunningly disguised as charming, pacifying promises. Macduff, who had not been at home when his family's murderers had arrived, gathers an army to storm Dunsinane in order to avenge the death of his wife and children and to end Macbeth's bloody tyrannical reign. As they near the castle and pass through the wood of Burnham, each soldier is ordered to hew him down a bough and bear it before him. Thereby shall we shadow the number of our host. Thus, from Macbeth's view on the castle battlements, it appears as if the woods have uprooted after all and are advancing towards him. At this, his confidence begins to waver, but still bolstered by the assurance that none of women born shall harm him, he leads his men in defending against the advancing army. Eventually, Macduff finds Macbeth, and they commence a duel with this exchange of words.
I'll lose a slaver! Let fall thy blade on vulnerable crests. I bear a charmed life, which must not yield to one of woman born.
Despair thy charm, and let the angel whom thou still hast served tell thee Macduff was from his mother's womb untimely ripped.
Accursed be that tongue that tells me so.
Finally, every pillar which Macbeth imagined to be supporting his safety has evaporated into mist, proving itself to be a mere mirage. So also is the sense of stability felt by those who build their houses upon the sands of uncertain riches. But this is the foundation modern society seems to have wholeheartedly opted for. Many of us seem to believe we live in the 2011 film In Time, in which our lifespans are directly linked to our bank accounts. No wonder so many of us are, not unlike Macbeth, racked with anxiety and depression. Deep down, we know in whom we have trusted, and therefore begin to panic at the first sign of a rain cloud and the first gust of wind. Now, perhaps you feel that Macbeth isn't a great example, that the moral of this story is more about the consequences of murder and immorality than the pursuit of wealth. Sure, all evil may be rooted in the love of money, you may argue, but does that necessarily mean that all instances of money love will flower into evil acts? Surely not all coveters are unavoidably doomed to a similar fate as Macbeth. Maybe you're right, but consider, Gandhi said that materialism and morality have an inverse relationship. When one increases, the other decreases. Jesus said, "No man can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will hold to the one and despise the other. Ye cannot serve God and mammon." James said, "The friendship of the world is enmity with God." Upon a little reflection, who cannot see the truth of this dichotomy? Who among us cannot perceive a little of Macbeth in modern society and even in our own hearts? Granted, thankfully, most of us have not stooped so low as to commit out-and-out murder in pursuit of riches. But ponder on this. In our most unprecedentedly materialistic generation, how many babes have both virtually and literally had their brains dashed out as human sacrifices to the god of mammon? With the blood of how many poor, innocent human lives have we forever stained our hands, consigning them to squalor, misery, and even death for the sake of our own comfort and luxury? How many creatures have we doomed to extinction with nothing to justify such reckless slaughter, other than, at best, our vaulting ambition? And at a smaller, more individual day-to-day scale, who among us hasn't felt stabbed in the back at one time or another by a coworker, business associate, employer, or employee? Who hasn't watched a close relationship be snuffed out by a tense dispute over material matters? Who hasn't occasionally felt tempted to fudge on their values at the prospect of an increase in riches, esteem, or status? Surely, every step we take along this, the greatest of all shortcuts, is a step away from the path of life. Every brick laid upon this shifting, sandy foundation amounts to a brick not laid upon that one and only sure foundation, a foundation whereon if men build, they cannot fall.